with these systems and the AI system, that of course it's going to facilitate clinical research. It doesn't mean that we're not going to do research, but it will be cheaper to do it, will be more cost effective. It will be, less of a hurdle for companies to go in and say that they're going to generate these data sets, these original data sets for a subset of patients that may not have been possible to do before when running clinical research without these AI tools.
Welcome to the Global Medical Device Podcast, where today's brightest minds in the medical device industry go to get their most useful and actionable insider knowledge, direct from some of the world's leading medical device experts and companies.
In the world of medical devices, time is usually of the essence. But here's the problem. Traditional product development processes are usually as slow as molasses. They cause delays and they're headaches for companies like yours. Greenlight Guru is the ultimate solution for MedTech's biggest challenge. You may be facing lengthy development cycles that drain your resources and hinder progress, but we streamline the entire product development journey. We make it faster, we make it more efficient and less prone to hiccups. By centralizing your data management, automating your workflows, and allowing real-time collaboration, it's all here. It's designed to propel your projects forward. And guess what? Regulatory compliance is built right in. It reduces the risk of costly revisions and ensuring you stay on track. With Greenlight Guru, you're not just developing products, you're accelerating progress, making a difference when it matters most. Don't let inefficiency hold you back. Embrace innovation with Greenlight Guru. Go to www.greenlight.guru to learn more.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Global Medical Device Podcast. My name is Etienne Nichols. I'm the host of today's episode. Today, I'm really excited to have Maria Nyakern with us. Dr. Nyakern has experience in the medical device industry as a clinical research scientist and entrepreneur across the spectrum of early stage startups to large multinational organizations. In 2017, Maria founded Nyakern Scientific Consulting, a European medical device CRO. As CEO, she led a 50-plus team of consultants supporting manufacturers in the regulatory and clinical development of medical device technology. Nyakern Scientific Consulting was acquired by NAMSA in 2022. And since then, Maria has sort of developed an interest in AI, which is kind of leads us to the topic that we're going to be discussing today. And I'll let you kind of speak to how that interest has developed. But today we're going to be talking about AI and how it affects medical devices and kind of just the entire political world that is surrounding AI as it pertains to medical devices. So Maria, how are you doing? And welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to this show. I'm really excited to be here today to speak to you about this very relevant topic. And today is the 12th of December. Not sure I can say that, but we recently had some really relevant updates on the field of AI regulation. So I'm excited to share that with you and a bit how I see the regulation around AI with a specific focus on medical devices, which is, of course, my topic of interest.
Perfect. And no, I don't know, we don't talk about the date very often, but my traceability experts out there will now be able to determine whether, how long it takes for me to edit and get an episode out. So that's good. So the thing to me, you mentioned the timeliness of this topic. It really is timely because what was it last week that the AI Act was released? Why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's basically, let me scroll back a little bit in time. In 2019, we started to see a lot of artificial intelligence software as medical devices appear on our radar, and clients that needed help to bring this through the regulatory framework in Europe. And at that time, it seems incredible now. It's 4 years ago, but it was really, there was a guideline we were stumbling by because, of course, this fell under the medical device regulation law, the medical device law in Europe. But in addition to that, it was the release of a guideline from a European perspective. FDA had something similar. And we always discussed, what the topic was at the moment, which was that we needed to develop trustworthy AI systems. And this word trustworthy, I bring that up because from a European perspective, it contains two really important terms. It's the trust and that you have to be able to trust these systems, and that they have to be worthy of humans. So I think that now that we have seen the AI Act develop over, I mean, these at least since 2021, when the European Commission first proposed this legislative text, and then it goes through the Parliament and the Council. It's like three political stakeholders that have to agree on this. It has been continued to refine and develop, but this word in itself, trustworthy, keeps on appearing, and it's a really important component of this AI Act. And then finally now, last Friday, they agreed on it, and people celebrate it, or they think that it's the death of innovation in Europe. It really depends on which camp you are in.
And I guess we can leave our opinions aside, but do you know, what are some of the reasons someone might be feeling like it's the death of innovation?
Well, I think it comes to a bit how tech industry and how innovation and how an economic model is developed in US versus Europe. We know that the European policymakers are a bit more cautious and regulates rather than being perhaps more reactive and dealing with things as they appear in the US. But that doesn't just relate to AI system. It's tech in general. Of course, we know that, and it reflects the different cultures between the two continents and the way that we do business. I think that, I work in compliance and regulation. So, of course, I am the wrong person to criticize any type of regulation, and especially the AI Act. I think that it's a very good beginning. It's like, as the medical device regulation also developed, and it stemmed from problems during the 2010s due to different scandals with safety on medical devices. This AI Act has developed, I see so much similarities, of course, with the medical device regulations. I think it's a pretty solid, good start. How this is going to affect potentially negatively innovation, I think, as with the medical device regulation, manufacturers and developers, they have to adapt and do as good of do a good job to understand the regulation and the legislations and comply with it and sooner rather than later. So of course, if you enter into late in the game, trying to get your product on the market without having understood what this means early on in the process, of course, it's going to be much more difficult. And then similarly to what we have seen with the MDR, of course, there was a blockage there due to resources. The pandemic came in the middle. There was a lack of resources at the notified body. So there were a couple of roadblocks that probably made manufacturers and the industry quite frustrated with the medical device regulation. But as in the regulation in itself, I don't see that it was something negative. On the contrary, and I think it's the same for the AI Act. Also, I think it's a good start. And I'm perhaps extending a bit, so you have to cut me there.
No, you're totally fine. It's interesting because I look back at why in 2023 did AI burst onto the scene suddenly? And we could, pontificate about that and probably not really pinpoint it. It's probably a lot of different things. But at this point, it almost feels like different countries want to be the best to handle it, whether that's the European AI Act or the US now has come out with the executive order. I believe that was October. Well, actually, let me look it up.
Yeah.
I've got October 30th, the executive order on how the US will handle artificial intelligence. And in some ways, it almost seems like a space race to get to that, to handle the technology before it becomes the AGI, the artificial general intelligence, the idea that that this AI can have human cognitive abilities to handle unfamiliar tasks. And so how are we going to handle that with a medical device itself? One of the things that the US came out with was the predetermined change control plan. and which I think some people may be stretching to be more applicable to handle changes in software than it really is meant to be. But I'm wondering, have you seen something like that or similar to that with the EU legislation around the regulation of medical devices? Are you familiar with that? And it's okay if not. Yeah, no, I can.
The predetermined, is it change control? Is it something related to minimizing bias and having robust data?
Yeah, there's a couple things there.
With the term.
Yeah, no, so the predetermined change control, that they came up with their acronyms because we all love our acronyms, PCCP. The idea is if you have an AI or ML machine learning device, then some things may change. So the algorithm has a certain amount of change in the future. So what you are submitting currently is going to be on your submission, but you also submit a predetermined change control plan with the understanding that this is how we anticipate our device to change. And so we're going ahead and submitting that as well right now versus doing an internal letter to file later. This is more of a, hey, this is how we anticipate. These are the certain parts of our algorithm that are unlocked. So that's the idea there. Yeah. It's not as extreme as we're going to change and diagnose different we're going to have different indications for use. It's not as wide open as a lot of people seem to act, but that's kind of the idea. Certain changes.
Yeah, no, but it's true that, in terms of maintaining compliance and technical documentation, this act is still not final. There is still, it needs to be, the final regulatory text needs to come into place. And then, of course, I assume that there's going to be also some guidance documents around that to where there are gaps, actually, how do we fulfill the requirements? But it's true that, a big part of it is that you say that, we will need to understand how might this continue to develop and sort of do some type of gap analysis on where do we believe that this went and what's actually happening in the post-market setting. Because one of the things that's really similar between the regulation of AI systems and medical devices to complex technologies, to high-risk complex technologies. That's why the regulatory framework is so similar in a lot of aspects. It's also the focus on, what happens. It's not just entering to the market, but what happens in the post-market setting. And we all know, at least you and I know, that a big shift in the life cycle development and the mindset of manufacturers of medical devices was that, you needed to have a much clearer focus what happens in the post-market setting. It's not just a question of getting, your pre-market approval and getting, your CE mark in the case of medical devices in Europe, but it's also doing this follow-up along the life cycle of your product. And this is also a very strong component in regulation of AI systems. It's minimizing, of course, data bias. It's making sure that the systems are fair and that they respect data privacy policies. And similar to in a post-market setting where we are obliged to collect data on incidents, adverse events or incidents, there's going to be this also type of oversight on the AI systems, and reported in a publicly available database, just as the same way we do with devices. How is this oversight going to be managed? In the case of course, medical devices, it's notified bodies. In the case of AI systems, they speak now about an AI office or an AI board. These are just terms for the time being, but I think we have now a 2-year grace period where I guess the exact date in 2025 when everybody will have to have adopted to this. I don't know what that date is yet, but they're speaking about a 2-year grace period.
Okay. And so I'm going to kind of go off into the opinion land for you for just a moment. So feel free to punt and just ignore this question and move on to a different one if you like. We talked a little bit about before we got on how we sort of get off track. So I don't mean to get us too far off track, but you mentioned something that I thought was really good in that the AI and medical device, the AI regulation is similar to medical device regulation for these different reasons. And you kind of separated them a little bit because that really is a good way to look at it. I like this categorical thinking, and this AI is a technology that has its own regulation. Medical devices is a technology that has its own regulation, and you bring those together as an AI medical device. Now you're kind of playing in two worlds. So do you see AI professionals becoming a bigger need into the medical device world, or are you going to see medical device? I mean, this is hard to predict, but medical device professionals. Yeah,
I see that our competences are, MedTech professionals, people with the experience of medical devices, clinical and regulatory experience. We have highly transferable knowledge going into AI governance. Absolutely. I mean, you should know that, again, I'm speaking about the European regulatory landscape.
sure.
One of the most regulated products in the European market, beyond pharma, okay? But speaking about the CE mark and it's of course medical devices. So having understood that regulatory framework, it was very clear that whenever you develop a regulatory framework related to another high risk complex technology, it would be foolish to not build on your knowledge around the MDR, especially where we came from a directive that had holes in it and that created products that of course our politicians and our policymakers needed to deal with, that we had products on the market that were not safe and that did not perform as intended. So I think the policymakers bring now with them a wealth of knowledge and a culture of how they would like to develop regulations in Europe that the European audience feels comfortable with. And you always know that there is this constant conflict, what the industry wants and what the policymakers want to protect the safety and the well-being of the citizens of the European Union. So since I myself come from a long background of medical device training and regulation, I found it quite natural to just step into this brave new world of AI development and how to adjust and adapt to the regulatory framework that is going to be put on us. And I think that there's a tremendous opportunity for a lot of people working in this ecosystem, MedTech, to sort of brush off their knowledge, take some additional courses, make sure that they understand the fundamentals of what AI means, and definitely keep a focus on this new AI Act and see how they could become one of these spokespersons and consultants or business opportunities, or it's the opportunities are endless, especially for people and folks that come from MedTech. They won't find it so difficult to create some new space from themselves in AI governance, especially, of course, when it comes to medical devices. But I think for any of the high risk AI systems, I think they will be able to adapt pretty easily.
I love that. It's very encouraging because a lot of people I've talked about are intimidated a little bit by AI, maybe the technology itself or but honestly, like you said, you have that background, those are transferable skills. So there's no reason to be intimidated. It's a brave new world. And you have my respect for really diving into that. So if we kind of come full circle, your background is pretty heavy in medical devices and clinical investigations. So what if we tie this together? What specific aspects do you think MedTech professionals need to be thinking about as these AI regulations come to play? And maybe, I don't know how we want to attack this, whether it's if you're developing an AI device, or if you're just in general developing a device, but AI can help you do that. What's your advice? And going either direction.
So You
I guess
know,
we need
I
to choose one first.
no, I think where I would like to start is, of course, data quality and data integrity, because having spent so much time in clinical research and being involved, let's say, in the last phase of the development of a medical device, which the clinical investigation is sort of the culmination of, when you have done your risk assessment and the risk management and whatever risk you cannot mitigate for or explain, of course, you have to bring your product into a clinical trial or clinical investigation to make sure that it's, you can mitigate for that risk and prove that your device or your product is safe and performs as intended. So part of the development of clinical investigations has always been the quality of your data and the integrity of your data. So designing a clinical investigation is also a question of mitigating for bias, and we do this in science in different ways. It's whether we look at male versus female, or age, or ethnic. What do you call it? Ethnicity.
Yeah, ethnicity.
Ethnicity. Yeah. So that is, it's becoming more relevant, of course, than ever, compared now when we are looking at clinical investigations of AI systems. And also the data privacy, it's also becoming a fundamental critical factor also to take into consideration. Working with clinical data, medical data of patients, of course, privacy is a huge thing, but I think we are just, we are at the same place as yesterday, but, multiplied by 1,000. Whatever we need to pay attention to yesterday, we have to pay attention to tomorrow, but multiply by 1,000, because also the systems that we have created, they are getting more and more, of course, vulnerable to attacks, because as all this technology is growing, we have a lot more data available, and we share all this data. That's why we are able to develop these AI systems to begin with, because there's so much data available, and having all of this huge amount of data and being able to analyze, it's one of the strengths of an AI system. But of course, those systems are vulnerable to data privacy attacks, and also, I would say, the data integrity in general.
Yeah, that's a good point. So when we look at this from a product versus a process standpoint, it's interesting because so if we stay on the process side, so we're using AI to help us analyze that data. I see a lot of different opportunities for that. What are your thoughts on the product? If the AI is the product that we're starting to produce, and we're going to go through a clinical investigation with an AI software as a medical device, are there specific issues that we should be thinking about, or thoughts or considerations you might have on how to fully investigate that as it pertains to the AI versus anything else? Or is it really just another medical device, or are there anything specific that you think that we need to be considering as we put an AI through a clinical investigation?
I think, of course, something that we had never, as far as I could think about, we haven't really been considering before, how we keep, the human in the process, because humans were always in the process before. Any type of tool that we have been working with before, whether it's a hands-on device or a software, it was always a traditional type of tool, where of course everything we did was human-centric, and humans were always kept in the loop. Now this is sort of an add-on that we really have to be conscious and build that in, and make sure that these systems are foul-proof in terms of having, the human decision making in the entire clinical setting. And I think also it will be important to now I got lost.
No, that's it kind of makes me go back to that word that you used at the very beginning, that word trust, because I never really thought about that before. Everybody has a slightly different perception of the facts that they are presented with, based on your background, based on your experiences. And so to be able to trust each other, one person told me, and I maybe this is relevant, maybe it's not, you can tell me, but one person told me, he's like, we can't all have a common understanding if we don't have a common background, because people talk about common knowledge and how it's not very common anymore.
Yeah.
Well, yes, common sense. That's the word. Common sense isn't common anymore, but it's because we don't all have a common background. So using an AI to test something versus using an AI to be tested, they both present different challenges. And so, yeah, I think that's kind of what we were talking about.
Yeah, it's remarkable. I think yesterday I saw that these large language models they've learned so many things that we don't know that they have picked up on the way. But for example, they are less efficient in providing you answers. The ChatGPT, for example, in December compared to May, because it has learned that in December productivity tends to go down, while in May it's one of the most productive months of the year. So just by telling the ChatGPT, for example, we are in May, it's the output increases, while
Wow.
it sort of knows the date that we are in December, the output decreases. So of course, the amount of bias that we have in clinical research, a huge thing. We already know that all the clinical data that we have collected, on average, is from a white male that's 65 years old, and from the Western world. So just going into, you can imagine everything that now our large language models are trained of course, is biased towards a certain set of viewpoints, a certain set of ideas, a certain set of what is considered common sense.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, there's of course no absolute context of what is the common sense for everybody.
Yeah. I've sort of latched onto the idea or the wording of AIs versus AI, because we tend to look at AI as just one big thing. A lot of the world seems to just artificial intelligence. It is one thing, when really we have AIs. We have different sets of data that we're using. And this is purely a speculation on my part, so you keep me honest here. But when I think about the bias in clinical investigations or clinical trials, so that's been a big push for the FDA on the US to really eliminate that bias and to increase diversity in those clinical investigations. Will we get to a point where we'll be even more specific, rather than having a big set of data across all different sets of diversity, ethnicity, nationality, all that you mentioned there? Will we get more focused and then have very specific clinical investigations for this specific set, so that you could have assigned different data sets based on ethnicity, nationality, almost going the other direction of widening the scope rather than just narrowing the scope and going deep?
I think there are two things to that. One, in a perfect world, we would go the direction where you are sort of indicating. If we would have an unlimited set of data, of course, we would not have to generate, every time a new clinical investigation. Imagine we would, be able to access all the data that's available, and have an analysis, and not every manufacturer repeat what we have done 1,000 times before. So that's of course an ideal perspective. However, to get to that, we need all of this variety of data, and we don't have that today. So how are we going to? We would need to continue, because the models are only as good as the data that it's fed with, and the more. We are like 1 year post launch of ChatGPT now, and when the word AI ends up on everybody's lips. And during this year, I again, don't quote me on the exact data, but I think that we are seeing already like 30% of what we see on the web is already AI generated. And the further we go with this, it's like, you're biting your own tail. The model itself becomes corrupted by not having access to original data, but more and more of just AI generated data. Of course, in this sense, clinical research, the area that we're in, and it's going to be so relevant to continue and generate original data, because that's, of course, what's going to get us out of this bias situation that we are in. And how we will do that, because that's the same way that we've been speaking about this for at least a decade, that the lack of data related to the female population or to minorities, it's a big handicap in clinical research. With these systems and the AI system, that of course it's going to facilitate clinical research. It doesn't mean that we're not going to do research, but it will be cheaper to do it, will be more cost effective. It will be, less of a hurdle for companies to go in and say that they're going to generate these data sets, these original data sets for a subset of patients that may not have been possible to do before when running clinical research without these AI tools. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
No, it does. It's actually really exciting to hear you say that, because when you were first started talking, you talked about all of the thousands of different clinical trials that are going on. Potentially, if that data was available to everybody, maybe you could reduce that number quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like you said, it would be a perfect world to have an isolated set of data for this particular class of person, or not class, but type of person, or whatever you want to define that as, and then provide that to every medical device company. That's a really exciting possibility. I don't know how to accomplish that at the moment, but I guess we'll have to revisit. I start to say in 10 years, but at the rate things are going, maybe in 1 year we'll be closer to whatever it is it's going to be.
I think that we, again, I want to come back to the perspective that a lot of people, of course, are scared about job displacement, and that there's no place for humans anymore in this new AI world. But I think that if you read, the text of the AI Act that we started to speak about at the beginning of our call, and how sort of how noble the role of the human is sort of integrate. Good. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, no, how it's. We're going to be going much faster than we ever had before, but we should still be at the helm. I don't know exactly what you're trying to say. Yeah,
it is. I think that I have to think about the quote that Einstein said. We have created a society that it's something with intuition.
The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. Exactly.
So one of the things, with the new system that Google launches, Gemini, which says that now it can reason, and it was one of over the past few weeks, it's like, okay, when are they going to be able to reason these systems? And that's what they say now, that the Google Gemini has the capacity to do. Yeah, but beyond reasoning, there's so much more to this equation, where I believe that humans have a special place in this ecosystem, and perhaps it is what this quote from Einstein said, that the intuitive mind, how was it?
The intuitive sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant.
Faithful servant. We have created a society
that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. Yeah.
So perhaps that's something that I think we should be mindful of, and building into that, it's remembering that this is a human-centric technology. It will be humans that will use it. Humans will ultimately need to control it somehow. I think the fact that we are facing this new type of coexistence with artificial intelligence. And by the way, we're using this word. I don't even know if artificial intelligence is such a great word to that describes it, because then you would immediately think about what is natural intelligence then. Are we natural intelligence, as in artificial flavoring versus natural flavoring, artificial light versus natural light? It sort of just already gives like a negative connotation and makes you skeptical, because we are skeptical to everything that we consider artificial. And perhaps that's already something that where we feel a little bit, it puts it in a negative light when it really shouldn't have to be that way.
Right. I like that you brought out that quote too, because it does make me think, there does seem something intuitively different about an artificial intelligence, even if it gets to the point where it reasons, like Gemini. I've seen some of those videos as well, versus a human. And I look at them, if you were to compare side by side, the human has been trained on a certain set of data, right? I have my experiences, grew up in Oklahoma in the US, I've been different, all around the world, but not to extent as someone else. But then there's this AI that is to the point, does it know things that I don't know? Well, sure. But is there a human element that maybe we fully haven't teased out yet, that there's something specific about that? I don't know. We're starting to get into some philosophical realm, which is hard for it's irresistible almost for me. So I have to pull myself back. We'll definitely put the links to all of the references we mentioned, the quote, the AI Act, the predetermined change control plan, if anybody's interested in learning more about that, and then the executive order from the US. And maybe at some point we can, as they get to be rolled out a little bit more in detail, we can maybe do a side-by-side comparison of these two and how things are going to differ from the US and the EU a little bit more specifically. But what are your thoughts? Any last thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, I do actually have one last. Yeah. I think it's so exciting because compared to tech in general, where females tend to be, a fifth or 20% or something like that, I see that there's so many interesting women taking, on leading roles in AI development, and especially from the US. So I think it's so exciting, and we have some really great role models that I think both young and older professionals can look up to these great women. And I think that's also beyond this as a technology, which I think has the potential of, solving extremely complicated problems and democratizing a lot of different areas, anything from research to entrepreneurship. The fact that also we have such a new wave of female leaders in this tech space, I think it's really exciting. And just as a last comment, there was, I think in the New York Times 2 weeks ago, they had a really big article about, the leaders in AI. And remarkably enough, almost none of these women were mentioned there. And that was sort of criticized in the social media. But I think we have the chance also to keep on pushing forward and highlight these female leaders.
Yeah, that's great. Where can people find you if they want to reach out and talk to you directly?
They can find me on LinkedIn or through my personal webpage. It's my last name.
Sounds good. We'll put links to those in the show notes. I may have cut you off. What's the name of the webpage?
It's my last name, Nyakern.com.
Okay, perfect.
It's very easy to find me.
All right. Thank you so much, Maria. Really enjoyed the conversation. And I look forward to maybe revisiting next year or having more conversations in the future. Really appreciate it.
Definitely. Anytime. Thanks so much.
All right, everybody. Take care.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, can I ask a special favor from you? Can you leave us a review on iTunes? I know most of us have never done that before, but if you're listening on the phone, look at the iTunes app, scroll down to the bottom where it says leave a review. It's actually really easy. Same thing with the computer. Just look for that leave a review button. This helps others find us and it lets us know how we're doing. Also, I'd personally love to hear from you on LinkedIn. Reach out to me. I read and respond to every message because hearing your feedback is the only way I'm going to get better. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.